Welcome to the Healthy Activities and Food Cooking with Children session. My name is Jo Ingleby and I'm the director of the Children's Kitchen, which is a Feeding Bristol project working across the city with children and families, encouraging food education and growing. In this webinar, we will be covering how to run a safe and engaging food session for children. This will include how to plan, which includes risk assessments and the food safety elements that you need to consider. Planning a session, what you need to do in advance and what equipment you will need. Ideas for sessions which will encourage children to become engaged in food and to learn to cook some healthy dishes. And simple activities that you can include daily in your HAF activity sessions. Within the Healthy Activities and Food Guidelines, there's an expectation that every day should include some kind of nutritional education for children. This could be something simple, such as a taste test, where children taste different vegetables, fruits, spices or herbs, or different cooked ingredients. It could be a more simple exercise where children are preparing fresh food and making a simple dish together. Or it could be cooking and actually preparing lunch. It could also include growing, so planting seeds for fruit or vegetables and taking them home, or tending a current growing space. There's also an expectation that each activity provider provides some kind of food education for families and carers at least once a week. This could be around cooking and recipes, it could be around budgeting, or it could be how to access food in their local area. Before you start, it's important you think about your sessions before you start them. Planning a session. You should do this before you even start your holiday activities so that you can be well prepared for running a food session. Over the city in this summer, there's going to be settings running activities indoors and outdoors, some with cooking facilities and some without. You need to consider what equipment you already have, what skills you have, and also what kind of session would suit your learners best. What facilities do you have? In some cases, such as schools or youth centres, there may be a kitchen that you are able to access. You need to check this in advance and make sure that the relevant risk assessments have been done. You may need to keep your ingredients raw. If you're cooking outside in particular, it makes sense just to use raw ingredients such as fresh fruit and vegetables. You may need to pre-cook some of the ingredients that you use, such as pasta or noodles. Are you going to be cooking inside or outside? This will make a big difference to what you're able to cook and also what you need to prepare. If you're inside, you need to make sure that your space is clean and hygienic and that your kitchen has been registered by an environmental health officer. In most community settings, this is something that is always done. Outdoor sessions need to have clean tables and also shelter from rain and also strong sun. So you may need to have a gazebo or a covered area that you can work in. Access to water is really important. The children will need to wash their hands before the session, as will you. You will also need to be washing fresh fruit and vegetables before the session and ideally doing some washing up, although it's safer to actually do the main washing up in a dishwasher. You need to make sure that the children are very aware of keeping clean. In an outdoor session, this can be difficult, so we would recommend washing hands, but also having access to hand sanitizers if that's appropriate. If you don't have a sink to do your washing up in hot soapy water or with a dishwasher, you'll need to take all of your equipment home with you. So you may need a box to gather the equipment so it can be taken home and washed. Do you have any experience in teaching cookery, or does some of your team? It may be that one of your team is a keen cook or has worked in a restaurant. It would make sense for them to be leading the sessions. If you haven't done this before, don't worry too much, but you do need to practice and you do need to spend some time actually thinking about the safety, the recipes you're going to use, and planning your ingredients. Food sessions which are badly planned and don't have the correct equipment or ingredients can actually put children off cookery and lead to a stressful session for everybody. When you're planning a food workshop, you need to be carrying out a risk assessment. This needs to be done for different types of sessions. For example, if you're cooking with appliances or a cooker, you need to do a risk assessment for this. And if you're working outside, working with raw ingredients, you also need to do one for that. Within your risk assessment or in a separate assessment, you should be considering current COVID-19 guidelines. A risk assessment helps you to identify the hazards that are currently present in your activities and think through ways to avoid them. Keeping your sessions simple and organised means that you're avoiding risks. By thinking ahead and identifying dangers and working through ways to prevent them, you're making sure that the children and also the adults in the session are safe. If you're cooking with electrical equipment or outside on a barbecue or fire pit, you also need to add these to your risk assessment, and you need to make sure that a competent adult is manning this equipment at all times. Before you hold any food activities or even serve lunch, it's important that you know whether any of the children you're working with have allergies or dietary requirements. You must be aware of all of the ingredients that you're using and whether they have any allergens present. If a child has allergies, you must make sure they have no contact with any foods that they are allergic to. This may mean using separate allergy-free alternatives for that child and providing a separate place to work where there's no cross-contamination. It's best to never use nuts during these kinds of sessions. This is an example of a simple risk assessment for a cooking activity. In a risk assessment, you need to work out what the hazards are. For example, are you using knives, peelers and graters? What are the risks to food? What are the risks of food poisoning? What are any risks within the room or space that you're using? And what's the risk of children reacting to food? You need to think about who those risks will affect and what the precautions and control measures are for you to stop them from happening. So think this through and then get someone else to check, because you may have missed something. If you have any further action, such as buying more equipment or looking at different spaces, make sure that's listed and make sure you tick it when this has been completed. This shows that you've worked through any problems and that you have thought about your activity in advance. The equipment that you use is really important. Make sure that it's child appropriate to the age that you're working with. We use plastic salad knives for the children's kitchen sessions because they are really safe to use, but you're still able to do some accurate chopping. They're also inexpensive. They cost around £1 each, so you can have one each for each child. If you choose to use metal sharp knives, you need to make sure that you are able to teach children to use them safely and that children aren't left unaccompanied with knives at any time. We wouldn't recommend using sharp knives with children under 6. Make sure that you've got plenty of bowls, and that's for the children to gather together the food that they're cooking, but also some bowls for collecting compost and food waste, and show children the importance of doing this. You may need to take the food waste away with you to dispose of through the council's recycling facilities if they don't have this on site. You will need a range of equipment such as plastic chopping boards. We use the flexible chopping boards, which are inexpensive and easy to clean. But you also might need some equipment like potato mashers or whisks or spoons or interesting bits of kitchen equipment that you have that you could show children how to use. Make sure you've got plenty of spoons, big spoons for mixing, but also teaspoons or smaller spoons for having a taste. To lead a food activity or cookery session, you should have a food hygiene certificate, ideally a level 2 or a level 3. You can complete this training online. It costs about £20 and takes around 2 hours to complete. The food hygiene certificate means that you'll understand about safe food handling, storage, and general food hygiene. This is a way to avoid any kind of food poisoning outbreak or issues around storage. It's good practice for anyone who handles food, especially those serving it to children, should have at least a level 2 food hygiene certificate. You can find resources such as where to get a food hygiene certificate, risk assessments and hygiene information from the British Nutrition Foundation website or from the toolkit pack that you've been sent. Ideas for food sessions which encourage children to try fresh ingredients. All of the HAF activities and also their lunches are expected to follow the school food plan. You can access the plan online and have a read through before you start. This means that all sessions are promoting healthy eating and good nutrition. You should try and follow the school plan whenever possible, and this means that you should be cooking balanced meals with fresh vegetables, proteins, carbohydrates, limiting salt, fat and sugar. You shouldn't be making fried snacks or cakes with chocolate. You should try and use a range of different carbohydrates, including some wholemeal each week. This means not just using white bread and white flour and white pasta. Try adding some variation so that children can try different foods and have a balanced diet. We should be encouraging children to try new foods, especially healthy foods that they may not have tried before. And it's not okay to focus on puddings and cake making. The school food plan is very clear that cakes can be part of a main meal, but they shouldn't be full of confectionery, and we should not be encouraging children to snack between meals. If you're not sure about the school food plan, you can look online at the school food plan guidance. Cookery sessions don't always have to involve using an oven or heat source. You can keep ingredients raw. Using raw ingredients is not only safer and more practical to do in an outdoor setting, it also encourages children to learn skills such as chopping and also try new ingredients. We tend to work around the idea of eating the rainbow, so using lots of different brightly coloured fresh ingredients and encourage children to mix them. You still need to be careful with the ingredients that you're using and also the equipment. Make sure everything is well washed before use, and it needs to be washed again between sessions and after the food session itself. You need to wash all fresh produce. Make sure this has been thoroughly washed and dried before using, because it may have been contaminated from between when you received the goods and when you're using it. You need to check that the COVID-19 guidelines are up to date in your setting, that you're taking into account any social distancing you need to do, and also whether it's okay for children to share ingredients. Best practice is to give them their own set of ingredients which only they use, and then allow them to take home anything they haven't used. You may need to bring some pre-cooked ingredients such as pasta in order to make more of a dish. If you're doing this, you need to cook it safely in a clean kitchen, and it needs to be kept in the fridge below 5 degrees. In the summertime, there are so many fresh ingredients to try. It's really good to base a session on herbs such as basil, chives, mint, oregano, parsley and coriander, which you can either use cut or you could buy plants or have them growing in your growing area. Try different coloured salad leaves. Children like to explore the textures and the different techniques for chopping them. And try different coloured vegetables such as cucumbers, peppers and radishes. You can use tinned or frozen foods too, such as sweet corn and peas. And try and add flavour to dishes without using salt. We use lemon, limes and oranges to add flavour, and also oils, vinegars and honey. But do be careful with honey and vinegar, as some children can have allergies or dietary requirements. If you're using pre-cooked pasta or noodles, you may need to have a gluten-free or egg-free alternative. There are some items that you can cook during a session as long as you have access to a kettle, boiling water and a safe place to do this. Rice noodles in particular are useful because they're allergen-free. Couscous is also quick and easy to cook, but it does contain gluten. We like to experiment with spices too. The safest spices to use are ground paprika, cumin, coriander, oregano and turmeric. It's best not to use chili in open food sessions as this can cause issues. If you're working in a community setting or a school, you may have access to a suitable kitchen for cooking food. You'll probably not be able to let the children cook at the oven themselves. So you need to think about sessions where the children can prepare food at a clean, safe table, which is then taken away to be cooked by an adult. Make sure you have a way to identify whose food is whose. Easiest way to do this is with a piece of greaseproof paper for each child, which you pre-write their names in permanent marker. You can then easily identify whose dish is whose, and they can also carry this away on the piece of paper. Make sure it's cooled first. Some settings also have access to a pizza oven or a barbecue, which can be used as long as it's done by an experienced adult and a separate risk assessment is done for cooking with fire. You'll need to make sure you have protective equipment such as heat-proof gloves and fire safety equipment. Techniques to use in a simple cook session are making bread. Simple breads are an excellent way of getting children involved, but they can be quite messy. Flatbreads, for example, that are just flour with either yogurt or water to make a dough, which is then squashed or rolled into a circle and cooked on a frying pan. They are really easy to make, but they can make lots of sticky mess that you'll then have to clean up. Making a simple pasta sauce with children as a demonstration works really well. They can chop all of the onions and the garlic and tomatoes, or use chopped tomatoes. This is then cooked and it can be used as a pasta sauce or a pizza topping. Freshly made pizzas are always a really popular thing to do with children, but shouldn't be done every day. When you're making pizzas, make sure you have a lot of ingredients that you can offer them as optional toppings. Different vegetables, you can use meat, you can use cooked meat such as chicken, but make sure that you know the child's dietary requirements before starting. Puff pastry is also something that's practical to be used, but can't be used every day. You can make puff pastry pies just by cutting a square of puff pastry for each child, which they then cut a smaller square inside and fill the filling with a choice of ingredients such as tomatoes, herbs. You may need to use a sauce or some tomato sauce and have cheese or cooked meat as an option to fill. This then goes into the oven and cooks until it is crispy, which takes about 20 minutes. You can also cook exciting and interesting dishes from scratch, either as a demonstration or with the children helping to prep vegetables. The safest way to do this is to let them chop the vegetables, but then give them another wash before cooking. Summer is the ideal time to be using fresh produce. Because it's in season, it will be cheaper and it will also be at its best. So before you start planning your sessions, work out where you'll buy your ingredients from. Try to avoid buying from supermarkets all the time if you can, so that you're supporting local producers and you're also shopping locally. Local grocers should be able to put you together a box of ingredients for you to collect, which will save you time and also mean that your sessions are well planned. If you're running sessions more than once, just keep a record of what you ordered and then make sure you adjust it before the next time you order so that you're buying the right quantity of foods. Remember, anything the children don't use in sessions can be taken home. This is a really good way to encourage children to carry on cooking when they get home. If you're ordering large volumes of food, you can order direct from Bristol Fruit Market. You ring them up and order, and then you can collect early morning before your session. Using fresh produce is really important when encouraging healthy eating. Many children don't have access to lots of ingredients at home to explore, and they may only see pre-prepared food. Give them time, give them space, and give them encouragement to try new things and to do it in their own way. Try not to bribe children to taste things or to coerce them into trying everything. Some children may not be comfortable with this and it may stop them. Puddings can also be made during food sessions. Fresh fruits are in season in the summer, they're cheap and they're at their best. You can add ingredients like yogurts, or you can make fresh fruit salads, you can make pancakes if you have cooking equipment. You could make simple cakes, but they should have a high fruit content and not be made every day. Here are some examples of no-cook recipe workshops. Any of these recipes are available from the Feeding Bristol website or from the Eat the Rainbow cookery booklet. Using multicoloured, brightly coloured and different textured vegetables are really key to making raw recipe workshops fun. Try and have a big range of ingredients so children can make choices and they can also try something new. Pasta salads work really well. You can use a range of shapes of pasta and use a mix of whole wheat and plain. Add your own rainbow ingredients and then have options for adding proteins such as tuna, ham or cooked chicken. Make sure you know the children's dietary requirements before you start. If you're adding a dressing made out of either yogurt or mayonnaise, you need to also make sure that there are no allergens that may affect children. Make sure you know allergies before you start your sessions, but always have alternatives available for children who may react. It's fine just to add oil if you're not sure. Wraps and rolls are really good for children to make. Again, you can have your choice of proteins to add to this. You could incorporate a dip within this as well. You can either use flour tortillas, which are easy to buy, or you can use rice wrappers, which are available from Asian stores. These are just made from rice, so they're allergen free and can be soaked in hot water to rehydrate, then stuffed full of anything that you fancy inside. They're quick and fun to make, and children can learn some chopping skills as well as wrapping and rolling. Couscous can be a really fun thing to make as well, and you don't need to use that much for each dish. You can rehydrate couscous using boiling water during a session, just making sure that you're doing this safely. You can then add any choice of chopped rainbow raw ingredients, and again you can add the protein of your choice as well. Dips are something that are easy to make and inexpensive. You can use tinned beans such as black beans, borlotti beans or chickpeas, which you can then mash with either a fork or a potato masher if you don't have a blender. You can add flavours to this, so experiment with spices, oils, lemon and other seasonings until you get a flavour that you like. Serve these dips alongside either vegetable sticks, or you can make your own nachos by chopping up flour tortillas and cooking them in an oven. You don't have to be cooking or running a full food session. Some ideas for really simple sessions to introduce food education. Growing is included in food education for HAF, and growing and teaching children about where their food comes from is a valuable lesson. If you have outdoor space in your setting, they may already be growing fresh vegetables and produce. If you don't manage this yourself, you need to check with whoever does that it's okay for you to use this produce. Most settings will be really happy to have people helping you water, but please be aware that they may have spent months growing this produce, so picking everything may not be helpful. Weeding is also something that you can teach children to do if you're confident, but make sure you're not weeding something that's actually a crop. If you're running growing sessions yourself, you may need to get hold of some equipment before you start, and usually you can do this cheaply either through a garden centre or a local nursery who may be able to donate some produce to you too, or some compost and pots. Another way to do this is to ask parents to donate. Many people have a stack of pots that they're not using and they're happy to give them to you. You can base whole sessions on seeds and plants. You can buy packets of seeds which have enough seeds in them for a whole group of children to plant several seeds for themselves. You may be able to access these donated from a local nursery or ask around amongst your groups to see if anybody has any spare. There's also the Bristol Seed Swap who you can contact on social media who may have some seeds that you could use. Seeds that are really successful grown in a pot on a windowsill include salad leaves, mixed salads in particular, and nasturtiums, which are a beautiful flower where you can eat the flower and the leaf. You can also grow beans and radishes in growing space, but you may need more than a pot. If you're doing this, you need to make sure that the children can plant in a garden. Learning about pollination and the importance of bees, butterflies and bugs is also something that can be very exciting for children and helps them understand about biodiversity. You can spend a set amount of time recording how many insects and creatures you find in a certain area and recording it on a simple chart. Buying a pot of herbs and splitting this into several smaller pots, which the children then take home, is also a valuable lesson. You can show children that growing plants can be turned into even more plants, which is a way of saving money and also creating something from nothing. Basil, chives and mint work really well for this, and you can also use those herbs in your food sessions. Tasting sessions are a really good way to engage children with food and are something that you could do every day. Choose a good selection of vegetables or fruits or both, or something like different types of breads, different types of carbohydrates, or some ready-made cooked foods. Make sure that that food can be divided up into the amount of children that you're working with, and encourage children to try things even if they haven't had them before, but never put pressure on them. Some children don't feel comfortable with these kinds of sessions. You can try spices as well if you have a way to sprinkle them onto something like cream cheese, where there's a fairly plain flavour and you can taste the spice. You could engage families with this. See if there's anybody who is already a chef or working in a food shop who could bring in something to taste. If you're bringing in food from outside or cooked foods, you need to know exactly what allergens are present before you start, and make sure that whoever is helping you with this is also aware. Nuts in particular can often appear in cooked foods and are very important that you know about this in advance. Tasting sessions are a good way to talk about balanced diets with children and to talk about the different food groups in a way that they understand. It's worth having a resource such as the Find Your Balance resource so that you can easily explain to children how much of each type of food they should be having in their food. You can run this alongside looking at packed lunches and what a packed lunch should include. Children should be learning this already at school, but it's always worth taking it easy and taking it simple just in case they don't understand. Looking at sugar is a particularly valuable way of engaging children with healthy foods. Sugary drinks in particular are something that children often don't understand the amount of sugar they're consuming. You can do several sessions just around looking at labels and working out how much sugar is in each drink. If you want resources to support this, the Sugar Smart app is well worth downloading onto an iPad or onto a phone, and this acts as a bar reader so you can read barcodes and work out what the sugar content is of different ingredients. Make sure that you understand yourself about this before you start. A lot of people don't understand how to read labels. Often the sugar content is shown per 100 millilitres, where the drink itself is a 500 millilitre bottle. So make sure you know what you're reading. You may also need a magnifying glass as this information is often very small. Trying to encourage children to drink water is also really important over the summer, just for hydration, but also so that we're encouraging them to get healthy habits. Flavouring water with ingredients such as mint, Cucumber strips, strawberries or pomegranate can be really exciting for children to do and also mean that they're learning good habits. Children excited by food and engaged with cooking. If you need any help or resources, please go to the Feeding Bristol website. Thank you for your time.